Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to tonight's episode of The Late Night Show with your host, Mehdi Ali. Tonight, I'm glad to announce that we have two very special guests joining us. Let's give a warm welcome to our first guest, the father of India, Mahatma Gandhi. Our next guest, Mao Zedong, is the communist leader of China. It's nice to meet you both in person. So, you've both created massive change in each of your home countries. What events over the past 100 years inspired you to take action?
You see, Mr. Ali, in 1858, the British made India one of its many colonies, and over the years they have oppressed us in a variety of ways. They made us buy only their goods, treated our culture as inferior, and did not let us have any say in our own government. People began to protest, but the British in turn began to retaliate. In Amritsar, hundreds of peaceful protesters were fired upon and killed. Eventually, people could take it no longer.
After Qing Dynasty's failure in 1911, and the failure of Sun Yat-sen to making major progress in China, China has been in an abusive relationship with foreign nations. Chinese citizens tried to protest and fight against these unequal treaties, such as the May 4th movement, but they all ended in failure. Chinese citizens suffered through famine and injustice. Meanwhile, the corrupted Kuomintang and Jiang Jieshi grew more rich and more powerful.
So, both of you took action because you were sick of the poor conditions in each of your home countries. But how exactly did you become leaders of each of the individual movements in your countries? And what does nationalism mean to you?
At first, I was just an attorney who had studied law in Britain. But when I went to South Africa, I was shocked to see that many Indians are treated like second-class citizens and do not share the same rights and privileges as their white brothers. I organized many non-violent protests and marches, and I was arrested. However, the British government soon gave in to my demands, and I was set free. When I returned to India, I was encouraged to spearhead the independence movements there, and I agreed. I believe that nationalism is unity and solidarity of all Indians, regardless of religion or caste.
Nationalism to me means China first. If we were to resist Western influence, we must industrialize rapidly. After I became leader, the forgotten men and women of this nation will be forgotten no longer. After I graduated from my local school in the countryside of China, I became very involved in organizing protests against Western influence and Western treaties with China. I used my job as a principal and a teacher of a school to rally protests and to teach the people and my students about communism. With more support of the people due to Kuomintang's failure to help them, I became one of the main leaders of the Communist Party.
So both of you faced a lot of hardships and difficulties during your revolutions. What were some of those, and who were your opponents in your struggles? Mr. Gandhi?
Of course, the British were very upset that we were calling for independence. They did not want to lose one of their prized colonies. They did everything they could to try and stop my protests, arresting me and many of my compatriots. In the end, they had to give in to our demands. However, even now I am still facing difficulties. Hindu nationalists are blaming me for the separation of India.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. What have been some of your struggles, Mr. Mao?
The enemies me and the people of China both faced were the Kuomintang Party and the foreign nations that have abused China for decades. The corrupt Kuomintang Party failed to protect its people and to free China from Western influences. In the 1930s, Kuomintang and Jiang Jieshi, their leader, have viewed me and the Communist Party as a threat to their power, and they launched several exterminations against us.
You were both successful in your revolutions. I'm sure most of our audience wants to know, how did you sway the people of your nation to your side? Mr. Gandhi, your response.
Actually, it didn't take much for the people of India to rally with me. They were sick of being mistreated by the British, and they were glad for a chance to stand up to them. Our non-violent marches and movements united the Indian people against a common enemy.
What about you, Mr. Mao?
Me and the Communist Party gained support from the peasant masses by redistributing land to them that were owned by the landlords. The peasants of China also supported us because of their hatred against the corrupt bourgeoisie and the Kuomintang Party. I appeal to the massive peasant population in China.
Some of the more well-known events and successes that took place.
Well, one of my most famous movements was the Salt March. With a large group, I traveled 240 miles to the Indian coast to gather sea salt. The British had outlawed any purchase of Indian salt and instead made us only buy British salt for higher prices. In protest, we began our journey to the sea. At last, in 1947, Our efforts were finally rewarded when India gained its freedom.
How interesting. Mr. Mao, your turn.
The Long March is one of the events I am most known for. Because of the exterminations against communists in China by Kuomintang and Jiang Jieshi, many of my communist followers were forced to flee from Jiangxi to Yan'an in the northern Shanxi province. Because of the harsh conditions during the march, only about 10 of my followers made it to Yan'an. The long march symbolizes my and the Communist Party's strength and persistence. Another event I'm most known for is the Red Army's victory over the Kuomintang Nationalist Party.
My final question is, what would you describe as the key to your success?
Well, I think there were many reasons that we were successful. My calls for unity and the end of class and religious distinctions brought many to my cause. Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs were all able to come together and demand justice from the British Empire. My non-violent marches also made it difficult for the British to crush my protests without receiving condemnation from others. As I had said at the time, my personal religion enables me to serve my countrymen without hurting English, or, for that matter, anybody else.
The support of the peasant masses allowed me to completely surround and choke off cities with nationalist garrisons. It's the support of the people, of the working classes, because of their hatred against the Nationalist Party and the Kuomintang government, that was able to take over power and reform China. As I said before, the people, and the people alone, are the motive force in the making of world history.
Thank you both very much for being with us here today. Now, we'll be back after the commercial break.
Do I still look bald? Wearing these clothes taught me a very valuable lesson. This is cold. Oh my gosh, my hair is glorious. I'll never. The big dude talking to himself.